Hello, welcome to our tutorial about integrating Salesforce with Zoom using Declarative Webhooks. We're going to show you an example scenario and a detailed guide how to implement this on your own in our blog at omnitorio.io in the Salesforce Integrations tab. So let's begin. Let's consider our integration scenario. We have a Salesforce campaign and we are hosting a Zoom webinar about this, and we want to capture the information about people who signed up and add them to the Salesforce campaign as campaign members. First step of the integration is to create a Zoom Marketplace app that is webhook only. After you created it, you need to enable a couple of features, validate the webhook, which we have shown in the blog in detailed steps. And you need to also check the event types that will be sent from the webhook. In our case, it will be webinar and whenever registration has been created for the webinar. So after you click save and validate the URL, you can receive webhook events by Zoom. But how are we going to process this and add the automation that we mentioned in Salesforce? This is where the declarative webhooks come in. After we configured Zoom webhook, we're going to create an inbound call template. And after it's finished, this is how it looks like. This is the URL that you will save to Zoom in order to point where the events and payloads will be sent to. In this example, we're not making any authentication with Salesforce, but we need to define a request body, which we also can check from documentation. You can copy and paste the documentation example and generate the sample JSON body here. And we also need to, when you're validating webhook, you need to return a successful response by using the Apex class that we have provided in the blog post. So that Zoom, after it's verified, you don't need to do this, but initially you have to verify your Zoom webhook. And this is done by the Zoom verification Apex class that we have provided. So you only need to create an Apex class and refer it to a response body of the inbound call out, and you're good to go. In order to actually do the validation, we have a quick reference that we can check if the event node is the endpoint URL validation value. Then we need to run the Apex class that is Zoom verification, which we have also provided in the blog. So this is how inbound template checks if the webhook requires validation. If it does, it runs the Apex class and returns a response to Zoom. After it's verified, you can receive events. If you look at the call logs from Zoom, according to the event types that you've subscribed. Another great feature of Declarative Webhooks is that you can run Apex classes and flow automations depending on the inbound call parameters and responses. So in our example, we're going to run this flow that we have also set up how to do in a blog post that checks if the webinar name exists as a campaign, and then checks if the member email, the person who registered for the webinar, exists as a contact or a lead in Salesforce. And depending on which record exists, it then adds them as that campaign member to the parent campaign. You can find the detailed example in the blog. And for example, we can skip this action if no record has been found with the webinar name or the member email has been found. Initially, when you're creating the inbound template, the main object will be empty. But in our case, we have populated it as campaign member because at the end of the automation, we want to add whoever exists in the system as contact or lead to be added as a campaign member to its parent campaign in Salesforce. So we have to pick the main object as campaign member. After you follow the steps in the blog, then after you activate it and validate your webhook and flow, then you're good to go. So in our example, we have a campaign called Zoom Webinar Campaign, and let's say that we hosted a webinar with the same name inside Zoom, and let's say that we're accepting registrations. And we have sent out the newsletter and we're waiting people to sign up. And let's also say that these people also exist in the system as, for example, let's say me exists as a lead in Salesforce. Now, if I sign up to a Zoom webinar with this email, I will be added to this Zoom webinar as a campaign member. So let's see how it works. So let's test our automation. We're going to switch to Postman for a second, and we're going to emulate for sign up for a webinar using the documentation example on Zoom. So let's test it out. We'll send the call out. Okay. And you can check the call logs and see what the response is pretty fast. And you can see the response code has worked. This is the webinar registration created event. And let's see if the lead has been added to the campaign member. All right, our existing lead has been added to a campaign member of the Zoom webinar campaign. I hope this example is useful, and thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.